Welcome back to Unscripted from my studios here in Columbus, Ohio. Special guest today. Met at my evening job, the job I do at night. And so I can't wait to talk to Jason today. Jason, can you introduce yourself and we'll go from there?
Yeah, my name is Jason Perz. My background is I was a professional BMX rider for about 15 years. And then I had a transportation business which transported ramps to school shows, NBA halftime shows, NFL halftime shows, and so on. And I did that for many years. And then fast forward, I transferred into finance right around that time. I've always been into it. I've always had trading accounts, but I just never did a ton with it professionally until probably 2014. 2014, I started working with a firm called the Dollar Vigilante, writing for them. And then I started working with a fund that was in Columbus, Ohio, and then basically started running my own fund around that same time, got hired by other funds, and still here, basically doing the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. So let's start at the very beginning because you mentioned it. How did you get in? You said BMX, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
So how did you get into BMX in the first place? Let's just start at the beginning.
So an interesting it's so I'm adopted. I had a uncle who worked at Drug Mart, and it's just like a corner store in Cleveland. I don't know if you guys have them down here in Columbus. They don't really exist much anymore. But he worked under the what was he? Was a city councilman or the mayor? I can't remember exactly what it was, but his name was Paul Preed. And he was like, "Hey, I want to, I got this extra bike I'm trying to get rid of, and was selling it for $80." Now, back then, the bike would have been $2,000 to buy new, and I was like, some guys wanted to get rid of one for $80. I was like 11 years old, and I was like, "Yeah, this is awesome. I'm gonna get it." And so I ended up getting that bike. And the guy taught me a bunch about riding. He taught me how to do specific tricks. He taught me how to he made like little, I still have these videos. It's funny. It's their VCR tapes, but he made some specific videos which were on how to do certain tricks, how to ride flatland, how to do things. They're like really like goofy, like how-to videos. The guy was a pretty eccentric, interesting guy. I loved Paul. He was a great guy, but he was super, super kind to me. And then I just fell in love with it, man. I was always a fanatic about anything I did, like having to do like things like too many times in a row, make it perfect. I still haven't really let that go as I get older. I wish I could, but it's like, so for example, if I would play soccer as a kid, and I'd have to kick a ball, and I would mark all these spots on our garage, and I'd kick the ball at it. I'd drive my parents crazy because I'd be breaking the garage and stuff all the time, and have to refix it. So it helped me to learn how to fix things at the same time, though. So I became pretty good at rebuilding the side of the garage every single year.
Right.
And then riding was the same thing, where it was like something where I could put that same kind of energy and effort, and so I could go, okay, I'm gonna learn this trick today. Okay, and then there's never a time where you're like, oh, I can do all these tricks perfectly. So because you can never do all those tricks perfectly, you're kind of always sitting there going, okay, I'm going to do this trick. I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to do this better. I'm going to try to do this better. I'm going to try to do this better. And as you continue down that road, trying to do things better and better, that perfectionist thing was like something that I was just obsessed with, like trying to get things perfect, learning new tricks, and then trying to perfect them. And I loved it. It was, for me, I had a lot of like rage growing up, a lot of anger, and it was like somewhere where I could put most of that, in a positive way. That kind of was very, freeing for me. Whereas most people, I don't think a lot of people really have that type of, outlet in their lives. And I really needed it, especially as a young boy. Like, I think there's a thing with young men in general where, like, people always talk about, well, we need to change football for the kids, and we need to like get the kids out of middle school football, or and you're like, I felt like as a kid, like I needed to run my head into a wall a couple times to make sense of things. I'm not saying like it's for everybody. I'm not saying everybody needs it, but like, what about those kids who kind of need those outlets? Are we keeping them away from, like, by making everything so safe, are we kind of keeping them away from those things?
Right.
So for me, I kind of always gravitated towards those things. Like, and luckily I had parents who were supportive of it, and they were like, hey, you know, I know you love doing it, it's fine. Even though I hurt myself plenty of times, I ruptured my spleen when I was really young. My
Goodness.
parents had to spend like the night in the hospital, like probably to say goodbye to me at one point. Like, I mean, it was a
Serious?
really, yeah, I ruptured my spleen. That story's pretty crazy. So I ruptured my spleen in Parma, Ohio. I was riding a skate park. Wasn't doing anything cool either. I was literally just riding around. I aired a quarter pipe. I came down. I was riding up one of the smallest ramps in the park, and I literally slid out and hit my stomach. And I didn't think much of it. And then I puked, and my buddy was like, man, that smells like strawberry something ice cream. And I was like, that's a really
That's
weird
bad.
thing to say.
Yeah,
And
that's
I didn't even
bad.
think, yeah, and I didn't even think about it. And I was like, okay, I'll be fine. I'll get up in a second. And then all of a sudden I was like, I can't get up. And I told my buddy Bobby, I was like, yeah, dude, you got to take me to the hospital. So this is where the story gets crazier. I get to the hospital, and I had literally just read a book about a guy who ruptured his spleen, Matt Hoffman. And so Matt Hoffman's a professional BMX rider, one of the biggest names in our sport. He ruptured his spleen. He said it felt like he broke his collarbone. And like, I literally felt like I broke my collarbone, but I didn't hit it. And so I walk into the hospital and I go, hey, doctor, I literally I ruptured my spleen. And he goes, you can't know you ruptured your spleen. And he gets on his ego boat, like telling me, like, maybe you fractured a rib, maybe you did this. And he just kind of like brushed me off to the side. And I was like, man, this is ridiculous. So
Right.
I believed him because, once again, I'm just a kid. And so I'm sitting there, and I remember the X Games were on that day. And I'm watching like Dave Mirra's run or something. And then like they come in the room, and they're like, it's after they did all the scans finally and let me sit there for 4 hours. And they were like, your spleen's ruptured. And I was like, I know. I was all like, I was just out of it at that time. And they were like, you're bleeding to death. I'm like, I'm gonna finish watching the X Games though. And they're like, we have to move now. And I was like, oh crap, okay. So they end up taking me to the other room. They're shoving IVs like every place they can put it. My feet, my legs, like my hands, everything. And then they get me on a life flight, and they fly me to Metro, because it was that bad that I almost bled out completely. Like, I almost died in the hospital. So it's like and then I had to spend 2.5 weeks in the ICU. So it was like, it was a really bad event. It was all mainly because, like, you could have probably went in and cauterized it nowadays, or even at that time, and done a bunch of things differently. But I had to get completely cut open because of the amount that I bled. Like, I mean, I had 39 staples in my stomach. So, I mean, it was a really crazy ordeal. But like, that was a lot of, part of it was I really that injury itself made me, I was riding professionally, but I wasn't doing that well at that time. That injury kind of made me go, okay, well, here's the worst thing that can happen to you. And not to mention, like, looking back, one good thing about the injury is, you know, when you rupture your spleen, it's not like something like a knee surgery where they're like cutting through your muscles. You're going to come back completely different later. So they end up cutting me open. I heal up. I'm heal up like basically 100%. And I'm lost a lot of weight, but I also was like really motivated to be really good at that point. And so like, it kind of jump started my career, where I was like, okay, well, worst that can happen is that. So what could be worse than that? Unless, you know, basically I die. And so it was okay. And then I decided I was gonna just do everything to be as good as I possibly could be on my bike. And I spent years doing that. And it was fun, man. I had a lot of fun. I don't regret any of it. I think a lot of people go like, man, that's cool, but that's really crazy. And it's like, no, it's all, and how do you get from there to here? And really, to me, it's like, it's all applicable. And you know, this as an athlete, like, everything's applicable. If you're an athlete and you're like, you know how you're a point guard. And that's what I used to play at school. Like, you run the point for your team. You know how to motivate people. You know who's good at what. You know, if you tell that one guy like, hey, don't shoot, he's going to never shoot again. He's going to hesitate every single time. And you tell the other guy, you can't shoot, and he's the guy who says, screw you, I'm going to shoot every time you pass me the ball now. And like, so you start to understand like everybody's different, how to motivate people. And that's really like part of business. And trading's very similar. Like, trading is thing where you have to understand risk management and risk to reward and all these things. It's the same thing with riding. So I think it's all very applicable.
No doubt, man. There's a lot to unpack there. So when I was a kid, I was at Cedar Point, and people told me I should sue Cedar Point. I was on the Mousetrap ride. I don't know if you ever went Cedar Point rode that, but
Yeah.
it ends abruptly, and I ended up bruising my spleen. They thought I ruptured it, and I was in the hospital, and I shared a room with a young lady, and her dad was super rich, and he gave me tickets to a Indians game.
Nice.
And so my family and I got to go to an Indians game because I bruised my spleen on the Mousetrap ride at Cedar Point. But no, I've been there, and so I didn't ever rupture it. I certainly didn't walk through what you did. But where in Cleveland are you from?
Originally from East Cleveland, right outside of it, in like around the Warrensville Heights areas where I grew up.
Well, I grew up
So
in Bedford, man. So
nice. So
yeah,
real
right down the
close,
street.
right
Yeah,
there. So
yeah,
yeah, so we're both East Side kids.
100%. Did you
But
ever go to
yeah,
Randall
man,
Mall?
I love Cleveland. I still miss it, man.
Yeah.
I miss my friends there, but Columbus definitely. There's a lot more opportunities.
Mhm.
There's a lot more things to do. Cleveland's like, and people always bring up the thing about me being a professional bike rider. And I'm like, if I really think back, what else could I have done?
Right,
You know,
right,
like
right.
maybe sports wise, maybe something, but like in Cleveland, what's there to do? Like there's a lot of bars, there's a lot
That's
of like
right.
food places. That's really it. Like so,
Yeah.
but at the same time, when I grew up, we had the best skate park in the world, best bike park in the world. Because honestly, people needed things to do that was inside, or weather sucks there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Right. Right.
yeah,
Right. You get
yeah,
8 months.
yes, you get eight
If you're
months.
lucky,
That's it,
you get 8 months, and that's it.
and a
And
lot of
I agree
rain
with
during
you.
that 8 months.
And I agree with you. We've all three of my kids were born here. I love this town. It's amazing, but it's not Cleveland.
Yeah.
Cleveland's always in my heart, and that's why I rock my 216 today.
216 hat.
That's why I
Nice.
got the tat on my arm. It'll always have my heart. So I want to say this to you as well, and then ask you a question because years ago, I'm a huge Carolina fan, and so we got tickets. At the time, I worked for a Fortune 500 company. We had floor seats for the Indiana Pacers because we were based in
Nice.
Indiana. I went. They knew I was a huge Tyler Hansbrough fan. From UNC, and
Yeah.
so they gave me tickets to opening night. Hansbrough didn't play; he was in a suit. We got pictures, but here's the whole point of this thing: is I took my son. He was very young, and the halftime entertainment, you mentioned this earlier, the halftime entertainment was some BMX guys. They brought a ramp out and they're doing all this stuff. And Jason, at one point, this dude had a horrible accident
Oh, really?
during halftime.
That's crazy because that usually is very rare during halftime shows.
Very rare, very
Yeah.
rare. But the sound and the moment were such that I grabbed my son and I pushed my son's now 24 and he's 6'4", and I couldn't do this today, but at the moment he was really young. But he was wearing his Hansbrough Pacers jersey. We got him that for his birthday, and I grabbed his head and I pushed it into my chest because the sound and the moment, I knew it was going to end bad. Like it was going to end very bad. And they ended up bringing out a stretcher. Like it was terrible, man. It was a halftime show at this huge moment. And so at what point did you decide to get out of the BMX?
I ended up, so the story goes, when I'm about 21, 22, after all the injuries I had, I basically got to a point where I became an addict. So I never actually drank a beer, went out with friends, anything until I was 21. So I'm 21 years old. I have no idea about anything. I end up, once again, all my injury stories, like you can watch videos, me doing all types of crazy stuff. You never get hurt doing crazy stuff. You always get hurt on something dumb. I stepped on a nail at a contest. So that's the worst injury I ever had.
You serious?
So I'll tell you why. So I step on the nail at the event. The event ends up getting rained out. I end up just going home. Okay, I'm going to go home. And on the way home, I'm not feeling very good, and my foot's starting to hurt really badly. But I get home, I'm tired, I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning, my foot feels like it's a brick. Like literally a brick.
Mm.
and I don't know what to do. And I literally I didn't have my car with me at the time. It was at another place because the person on the trip just dropped me off. And so by the time my girlfriend at the time gets home, the whole apartment is wrecked.
Mm.
The TV is destroyed. Everything around it is destroyed. Like I had wrecked the whole house because I was sitting there for hours trying to wait it out until she could get home, and I was wrecking my own place. It was crazy. And I'm not a person who does things like that at all. I was just in that much pain.
Yeah.
I get to the hospital, and they go, "Oh, what's funny? I forget about this. On the way home, we actually stopped at a hospital, and they sent me home and said I was okay."
Mm.
So I get the next morning is when it gets even worse. I go back to the hospital. They end up going, "Oh, you have a staph infection in your foot."
Mm.
And so I go, "Okay, what do I take for it?" And they're like, "Well, you're going to be here now."
Really?
So I get admitted for a week. They can't really figure out how to get the infection to go away. About 3 weeks later, which I'm still in the hospital at the time, they finally find they're using vancomycin, which is like the nastiest. If that doesn't kill it, nothing's gonna kill it type of antibiotic. But it messes up your whole body. Like you feel terrible. So they end up giving me something called a PICC line, and what a PICC line is
Yeah.
it's a IV that goes through your arm into your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can give yourself your own IVs. But also they gave me painkillers to go home with to also use this with.
Right.
So I get probably, and I really didn't take them at all until the end. And then I took it a couple times, and then I didn't feel very good. And I went to my doctor and I said, "Hey, I'm not feeling so hot. Like now that I'm out of these, is something wrong with me?" And I was really ignorant to all this stuff, and I wish I wouldn't have been. That's one thing I wish I try to change going forward if kids ask, and that's why I'm very open about it. I want people to know it is a real thing. Like in my
Mm-hmm.
head at the time, it wasn't, but
Right.
it is a very real thing.
Yeah.
And so I go to the doctor, and he goes, "Oh, you'll be fine in a couple days. Just go home." And so then that starts me down a path of drinking.
Mm.
So I go home, I start drinking like crazy, which ends me up in a whole slew of
Right.
trouble for about 4 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
4 years, slew of trouble, everything I could possibly get into that was bad, I did. My career kind of went away, but that's the other thing about it is when I was 25, 26, I ended up riding again in events once I got clean.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up competing, making some finals, competing in an international event, and made a final one more time. Some things I just wanted to kind of cross off my bucket list, like, hey, I could get back there, I could do that again, and I did. But getting to the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm done with this, was probably about the time I was 30.
Mm.
I was 30 years old. I hit my head really badly once. And it wasn't when I was a kid, you hit your head, I probably wouldn't notice it the next day.
Sure.
I was off for a month or so. I wasn't myself. My balance was off. Everything was weird. So I kind of got to that point of going like, hey, maybe it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it wasn't only that. It was my body started getting messed up.
Mm-hmm.
My hips started to really bother me, like jumping out of truck and trailer stuff. When you're towing stuff all the time and you're jumping in and out of a truck and trailer, you hurt your hips. So I sit in a car all day. My hips started to get messed up. My back starts getting messed up. I'm starting to I got to a point where I couldn't walk at all. And then so it wasn't even that I wanted to stop riding. It was I was kind of just taken away from it completely. So I hit my head, was second guessing it, and then my body just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Finally, I went and saw a really great doctor that really helped me with. She's actually in Columbus, Dr. Dev. She runs Hybrid. I don't think it's actually called Hybrid because that's the one next door to you guys. That's the one where they split off, but it's through the Spot Athletics.
Oh, yeah.
And so she runs that place for a while. Devi, God, I'm forgetting her last name. Anyways, but Dev really helped me get my back together, my body back together. I read a book on back pain, which is funny. It's called Healing Back Pain. And it sounds absolutely ridiculous. And if it wasn't the person who told me to read this book, I would have thrown it at a wall. But the guy who told me to read it was a guy I watched fall out of a ceiling and break his back right in front of me.
Mm.
And I said I had back pain one time, and he said, "Oh, you got to read this book." And basically, it tells you that a lot of your back pain is psychological, and it's all based on your stability and the rest of your body. And so I really kind of, as much as I wanted to be like, this is not real, like don't tell me that this is the pain is real, which it doesn't mean pain isn't real. It just means our brains have a way of amplifying pain.
Mm.
And so as I learned how to kind of control that pain, I was able to kind of work out again, do certain things again, walk again, like, get back into some form of shape, which was great. So for me nowadays, it's like I like to go ride once in a while with my friends, keep it real easy, don't get hurt, could come home,
Yeah.
play some
Yeah.
basketball, keep like my body together,
Yeah.
and I'm happy. So it's a growth thing. I think something that you've probably heard a ton from athletes is it's very hard to go from being a professional and being one of the best in the world to being a normal person. Like
Right.
it's very hard.
Yeah.
And so that's something that took me some time to like really grasp and understand that, hey, it's just a different part of life. Hey, I'm doing this thing now over here with finance, and I'm having fun doing that. So it's a growth thing, and it
Mm-hmm.
takes time, but it can work and it can happen.
Man, wow, so much there. Yeah, and I agree. I think as a competitor, there's a point where we're always going to be competitive. And so, I mean, I think that's, and I want to unpack what you're doing now in a minute. But I want to ask you this. I heard Donald Trump on Joe Rogan's podcast last week, I believe it was, a week before, whenever it was. And something he said that just stuck out to me. And I thought about you because I know you come into our facility at night, you get your shots up, and Trump was talking about playing golf.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying like, that's the only time that I can shut off. And even as president, he could turn off everything that was going on in the world and just focus on that 3-foot putt. Is that why you come in to our place? And then I do want to talk about what you do now, because I have a feeling that might be why you come in, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that why you come into our place and just get shots up?
Yeah, honestly, for me, there's a lot of it. One is that competitive thing. The one thing I think I can do as I get older is I could probably shoot better.
Yeah.
I was as a
Yeah.
kid, I was the super athletic kid who the coaches would be like, your athleticism one day is going to fail you, and I would say, how?
Right. Right.
And like, you learn how to handle fast, and especially back then in the 90s, like, you didn't need three pointers. You had if you had a good like hook shot and a good layup package and you could drive, like you had a place on a team. Nowadays it's like, no, you better be able to shoot.
Gotta hit the three.
So
Right.
for me, as I get older, I'm like, well, I could learn how to shoot better. And I have, my hip problems and my knee problems. So getting in and trying to like figure that out also has been helpful for me to just get my body back together. But you're right, when it comes to the ability to just shut everything out, that is it, man. I really think, one, it's super fun for me. There's a park right next to my house. I have a bunch of buddies who come up about 2 or 3 times a week, and we get a bunch of games together, and that's always fun. And so, like, my off days of them just being able to be like, okay, I'm gonna zone out, I'm gonna go shoot, work on my shot, kind of tune everything out, tune out all the noise around me. That's it. And also, it's just the way I'm wired. Like I'm very thankful that at my age and after all the injuries, I can still get out and play 6, 7 days a week. Most people, they can't do that, and so and also that's just the way my brain has always been wired.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I do something, I do it a lot. I probably do it too much. I probably wreck my body too much doing it. Like that's kind of part of just my personality. And people around me have had to, and I feel bad sometimes because I know people around me have to like come into that. And I know a lot of athletes talk about that now, like the sacrifices you make to be good and the people around you, the sacrifices they make. And, I felt like, once you get older, maybe things change, but it's like, well, no, like your brain is still that brain, like that brain that thinks like, I need to be competitive. I got to play games. I got to get better next week, like, or hey, I just played a game, and I'm talking about like a pickup game. You know, you play a pickup game, you're like, oh, when I see that guy next time, you know, like your brain's still wired like that. And even if like, you know, you're like getting, you know, blasted out there because you're slower and a little bit older and a couple injuries, like your brain is still exactly that way. So I don't think that's ever changed for me, or is going to change. Like you mentioned, competitors will always be competitive. That's a great way of saying that.
You come into Just Hoops, you take some time away from what you do now, and I do want to transition now to what you do now, because it's amazing what you do now. And I know you escaped to our place. We've talked a lot about athletics, but what you do now, can you explain to everybody kind of what you do now?
Yeah, so now I run a couple different things. So I work with a company writing finance papers. I've been doing that for about a year now. The company is called All Star Charts. So they're also partnered with my brand, which is another newsletter company called Against All Odds Research. And then I also have a fund that I run, which is called MWR. That fund has been running for about 5, 6 years now. 6 years now. Yeah, so we've been running about 6 years. Years ago, I was working with big funds, big institutions that kind of kept running into weird, sketchy people over time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it for myself, with myself, partner with people I know. That's about it. And just do that from now on. I don't work with big institutions or big funds anymore, unless like they could. I'm not gonna say if they came to me with some big offer again, like I might be interested. But
Sure.
for now, I'm very happy turning them down most of the time.
And I dealt in the athletics world, and when I went to Just Hoops a year ago, it might be a year ago today. It's a year ago this week. That's what I told them when I went there. I don't want to run your building. I don't want to, like, I just want to work your front desk, and I really do. And I could not love my job, to coming in at night, putting up you see me putting up the machines, plugging them in, unplugging them, getting people set up. Like I don't want the rest of it. And I have a feeling you probably appreciate that, having I've run facilities before. I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that anymore. It almost killed me. And you've talked about addictions and things like that. Yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. I am so happy and content with what I get to do. And I also walked away from everything and started what I do now. And so I
Hmm.
think we have that same appreciation for one another, is the fact that it's like, I can do my thing. I can do my thing. I can pay my bills. And so if someone comes to you, what is the situation? Because, the finance world right now is crazy. So
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. When I left corporate America, I had a really fat 401k. I
Hmm.
moved it to an IRA. It's sitting in that IRA, and I trust my local bank to just handle it.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's good, bad, or otherwise, but they've done a pretty good job. I haven't lost
Well,
money,
that's
so
good.
that's a good thing. But so if is that the situation? Should, like, if everyone's listening to this right now and they don't know what to do with their 401k, IRA, those things, that's what you do, right?
I think that's pretty simple. So what I do is different. So I trade futures markets for people. So that's what I do, and I also do have a long term fund management that's more similar to like a retirement account. But I would recommend people do exactly what you're doing.
Okay.
Trading the market. You know, they did a study years ago, and they took all the TD Ameritrade accounts, which was the biggest firm at the time, and they did a study and figured out who made the most money over the years. And the people who made the most money were the people who forgot about their accounts.
Mm. Right. Right.
So that
Right.
tells you something. Like, and so
Right.
I really believe that, like, even I'm a trader, but I'm certainly not a short term trader. I'm certainly not a day trader, not even anywhere near that. My time frames anywhere from 6 months would be the shortest. 2 years is probably the longest. And I think that being in that longer term time frame, whether you're just a retiree and you're like, hey, I want to buy and hold. Another thing that comes up a lot is election years. A lot of
Right.
people think like, hey, election years are a time to pull your money out, run for the hills. Really, what you find out, whether Democrats get in, whether Republicans get in, that the election years are actually really bullish. Over time, they usually move up unless you're in a recession. 2008 had a bad year. Obviously, that was a recession and an election year. 2000 was another recession election year. But besides that, the market has been up all those elections going forward. So every single election year going forward has been good for the market. And most of the time what happens, and this is really interesting, is once the election stops, the market usually explodes higher. Whoever wins. Because some people will be like, yeah, it's because, this person won or this person won. And really I think people are tired of, of all the election stuff by the end of it. Exhausted, yeah, exhausted fighting with their friends. Everybody's fighting with their friends, or there's all types of crazy stuff. And once it's done, it's done. And it seems like people feel safer to put their money back in the market. Whatever it is, I'm not exactly 100% sure. But I know statistically, over time, right after the election is usually a very bullish period, like November and through December to year end. So once again, it's a really good year to just kind of do nothing. Whereas a lot of people want to do more in that year, it's a year to really do nothing.
So do you take clients?
Yeah.
You do.
So we take clients, but there's two different things. If you want a very stable IRA, I'm not the person to tell you like my fees are going to be higher than your local bank, for example.
Sure.
So I'm not a person who's going to tell you, hey, I'm going to do better for you, give me your money. I'm the person who's going to tell you, well, if you're at a local bank, that's great. Like you're probably going to get your best fees because they're not managing, if I'm managing, 20 million, they're managing, billions.
Right.
So basically they're able to give you better fees. It's kind of like if you're an auto shop and you're like, hey, can I get an oil change at your shop? And they're like, you'd probably be better off just going to Lube Stop.
Quickie
they're
Lube,
gonna charge, they're going to charge you $50 and I'm going to charge you $150. So
sure.
It's more of a, what I tell clients is once you build up your net worth and you're like, okay, well, I have an extra 100,000, 200,000 that I want to put away with somebody that's going to really outperform. That's when I tell people I'm the person to call at that point. But really, I think like the way to set up your wealth is build it up slowly. You build up your IRA, your retirements, your 401k, whatever it is. Then start to come in and buy things that are assets. You could buy real estate being one. I like gold itself. I think gold is a very great thing to own. I've always been a big proponent of gold over the years. Just because if you really look at it, since we started all these crazy monetary policies where we just pump money into the markets since 98, basically, gold it's outperformed even the S&P 500 since 98. So it's one of the best performing assets. When you have it, you own it. You can have it right in your basement. You can have it at a bank in a safety deposit box, however you want to do it. And so that way you just own it. That's another great thing to own. And then you start to get into those riskier things. But I think too many people do it the opposite way, where they're like, hey, I'm going to start with the riskiest thing. And then I'm going to move to that other stuff. And it's like, no. Like most of those stories that you hear of the people who really made a crazy amount of money from one crazy trade, that's a 1 in a million story. Like they do happen, but they're very rare. It always sounds cool. Like, if you think in your head, I wish I bought Bitcoin when it was $1. I wish I did that. Everybody wishes they did that.
Sure.
The problem is those situations when you would want to buy Bitcoin at $1, you probably wouldn't want to do it because it just looked so risky. So many people didn't want to be interested at that time.
Right.
So now it's basically take your money, put it in the safest thing, learn about compounding. Compounding is the best thing you can do for your wealth that people don't think about enough, which is, if I make 100% this year and then I make 0 for years, it'll be less money than if I make 10% for 10% straight for 5 years, 6 years. So 6 years, I can make 10%. I compound my gains. So basically, if you have $100,000, you have 110,000, and then you make 10% on 110,000. Then you make 10% on 121,000, and then you just keep moving up over time. And this compounding together, like that's the real key to making money. The key to making money isn't this big hit that you're probably not going to make once in a 1 in a million shot. It's kind of like basketball, let's use basketball terms because that's easy.
Sure.
The full court shot. You could take the full court shot, but you're probably going to miss it. The person who just goes for the layup, they're probably going to do a little bit better. So once again, it's the people you see all the time on TV who are like, oh, you could take the full court shot for $1 million, but you could get $30,000 doing the layup. It's like you'd probably be better off doing $30,000 for a layup.
Right. So you're doing the long term. You're not looking to win a battle. You're looking to win the war.
Yes.
Is that way to say it? Because I'm not very bright, so I'm trying to track, and I want to make sure I honor you well in terms of what you do. So you're not looking for winning. You're not looking for that game stock thing when. And I'm completely out of my league here. But,
no, you're right.
But
you're spot on. Like the GameStop.
So when GameStop did their thing and a bunch of people made a lot of money, they probably lost a lot of money too. But at the end of the day, and some people may have no idea what we're talking about, and it's just because I read Twitter. So I want to go to that links. What are all your links so people can find you? Because you're on Substack and you write some exceptional articles about things that you're just talking about right now that I think anyone could learn from. What are all your links?
So I run Against All Odds Research, which is AA. All of them are at AAO Research. One's at Substack.com. So Substack is just a newsletter platform, which makes it really easy for people. I basically built a website at one point, was trying to do everything to do with that, and then finally one day I was like, look, Substack's probably going to be the easiest way for me to do this and actually focus on trading. And so I'm not taking too much time on my website all the time. So I started using Substack. So you can subscribe on Substack. You get a bunch of free stuff. There is paid stuff, but the paid stuff is just the trading updates. The real stuff on, managing your wealth, things about compounding like we talked about here today. All those things are just on there, or crazy stories over time. We got stories of bubbles about a guy trying to kill me in 2017 over me telling him Litecoin couldn't be worth more than Bitcoin. He tried to kill me over it, and that's a pretty funny story. So, lots of funny stories, lots of good times, a good group of people to hang out with and just chat markets with. So if you guys are interested.
And you have a YouTube or a podcast as well?
Yep, YouTube is at AAO Research. Same thing with the podcast, and if you are on the Substack, all that stuff comes to you as well. YouTube, AAO Research. We do shows 3 times a week. Mondays is a show on commodities. Fridays is a show on macro markets, and Wednesday is a show on trader psychology.
Incredible. Okay. Last question for you. I'm asking this of every guest that comes on. I don't know if you've listened. You probably might already know this. You might not. But what would you tell your younger self? One thing you would tell your younger self?
It depends. It's funny that you say that because I asked that question too. I heard you ask it before, and I was like, I wonder what I would answer to that because there's 2 younger selves for me. So I'll answer it in 2 parts. There's the BMX self. I would say continue to study more and read more as you're on these road trips and as you're bored. Understand that this career that you love, even though I know that like you're all in, because nobody could have told me anything different at the time. You're all in. It might not last forever, so think of some other things. We have our kid who's 20 now, and he's doing great stuff over in Colorado. He's trying to be a professional skier. However, he's still keeping up on his studies. He's still he's a chef now. So it's kind of really cool to watch him do those things. And to my younger investment self, I would say your Uncle Bob probably I had a great uncle who told me so many great things about markets. He was a very interesting guy. He was autistic, and back then they thought everybody who was a little bit different had Down syndrome. So he got basically kicked out of his family, and not basically, he got kicked out on the streets. And he grew up pretty rough, but he grinded himself up. He started he became a mechanic. He ended up trying to do back then during the war times, there was a thing before FEMA. I always forget the name of this thing. But basically, it kept the trains running in the United States to kind of keep everything moving. And while the soldiers were at war, he wasn't allowed to go to war. And so he wanted to go, but he wasn't allowed to go because of his mental state. So he did that, and then he ended up buying a big apartment building where he put the family all up in and took care of them because my grandmother's family died, so he took care of all them. I mean, he just was a very interesting man, and he continued into real estate, continued with his businesses, saved a lot of money, became a great investor. And you started out learning from him, and I wanted to be more short term than him, and I wanted to learn things in a different way because he was my uncle, and I knew some things better than him that I thought at the time.
Sure.
And all the things he taught me was spot on. It's all the things I use today. So I wish I would have thought about those things more. I wish I would have thought of the long term more. I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't think about when you're really an investor, or just life is the real long term. You talk to people and you're like, yeah, I'm saving money, I'm putting some money aside, and they're like, why? You're gonna die.
Right.
Like you're like, well, it'd be nice to me, money isn't a thing. Like I've had some really, really great years. You'll never see me driving around a crazy car or any of those things. Money is a thing that it's a tool, and that tool is used to protect your family, to protect your life going forward. If something goes wrong, I don't have to worry about it. I can go, hey, I have enough money to take care of this situation.
Right.
Those are the things that I like money for. I could care less about having a nice car or any of those things, or dressing better.
Sure.
None of those things matter.
Yeah.
So I think that keeping all that in mind, I would tell my younger self just to be more long term, understand those things, understand that like compounding matters. Like, yeah, if you have $200 and that's all you have to put away, continue to put that away. If you have $1 million to put away, put that away. That's great, but most of us don't. So whatever you have, continue to put it to the side. My uncle, he made millions, and all he did was save half of every penny he earned. He told me when he first made his first million that he never made over $30,000 a year at that time.
Wow.
How crazy is that? And it's because he saved money from the time he saved half of every penny he earned from the time he was 10 years old. That's crazy.
I think people see that in their 401k, right?
Yep.
It comes out of your check. It's just like taxes. They come out of your check. We don't see it. And then one day you look at your 401k and you're like, holy crap. Like, I'm pretty well here,
money in there.
There's money in there, and I think hopefully, and it's changed so much over the years. But I think hopefully, when many of us retire, they look at that 401k and go, "I did okay," and I never saw it. To your point, because it was out of sight, out of mind. It's just like paying tax when you go and buy something. It was out of sight, out of mind, and then you look one day and you're like, to your point about compounding, it's whoa. I got a little money in there, you know what I mean? And I appreciate that. I appreciate you, man. It is my honor to put up a hoop, put up a machine, or take it down for you, unplug it. I love when you come in because you do your thing and you go home. And I'm not saying the people that come in don't, but it's a joy to have you in our facility. I just work
it's
there,
always good, man. You guys are a great group of people, and it's always good to come in and that's one thing I always like about it is like, everybody there is just like very helpful.
Yeah.
Everybody there is awesome. Brad's a good guy. Like all of everybody around you guys is good, and it turns into a good vibe always. So it's one thing I really love about Just Hoops, and probably, lifetime member at this point.
Well, I love it. And honestly, I'm a lifetime, as long as they'll have me, I'm a lifetime member as well, as far as working there, because it's great culture, and I've come from cultures that were not that great. And I appreciate what they have set up and what they do, because, it's just special. It's special. I've not had a bad day in 1 year. That's 365 days working there. I've not had a single bad day. And that says a lot, because I don't know how many people can say I worked at a place for a year and didn't have one bad day. I love what I get to do, and I appreciate it. It's a joy, and it's because of people like yourself that come in and just do their thing. And everybody's got a story, and so I'm so thankful that you came on today and told yours.
Well, thanks for having me, and anytime, man. And thanks for having me. Really appreciate coming on. It's always a lot of fun to just have these conversations, and hopefully you guys get something out of it. Make sure to, if you take one thing away from it, save money.
That's right. Save
one
money.
thing, save money.
That's right. And contact you. Can you give me the links one more time before we get out?
Yeah, so AAOresearch.com is the website. AAO Research at Substack is the newsletter. AAO Research on YouTube is the YouTube.
There you go. I appreciate you, man. I won't see you probably maybe Sunday. You gonna be there Sunday?
Yeah, I think so. I'm usually
All right,
there
I'll
on
see you
Sundays.
Sunday.
All right, man. I'll see you later, man.
Happy Halloween to you.
Take
Thanks
it
so
easy,
much
man.
for getting
You
this done,
too.
man. I appreciate you, brother.
Oh, thank you, man. You take it
Talk
easy.
soon.